Erev Tov Rabotai. Let's continue from yesterday. We were talking about the 48 qualities that allows a person to acquire the Torah. So let's continue and talk about the next quality, which is besimcha, right? Very important to understand, right? That a person has to be besimcha. He has to be joyous. He has to be happy. If a person is not a happy person, he cannot acquire the Torah. He cannot serve Hashem, right? At all. When you're sad, you cannot serve Hashem like that. So you have to overcome. A person has to overcome sadness. If you want to go higher, into the levels of the Torah, sadness doesn't go. It doesn't go there. That's why it says in the Tehillim, right? Ivdu et Hashem b'simcha, bo lefanav birnana, right? It tells you, David HaMelech, you have to serve Hashem with simcha. So when you lose your simcha, that's it. You can't go anywhere like that. When it comes to happiness. You know what it is? I have to tell you the truth. Be'emet. If a person doesn't have simcha, that really shows that he's lacking emunah. Right? He has lack of emunah. You know why that is? Because if you really had emunah in Hashem, you'd be happy. Why? What makes you sad? Because you don't have the emunah to believe that Hashem, whatever He does, is for the best. And this is why you're sad. This is the reason why you're depressed. Because you don't have the proper emunah. And if you don't have the proper emunah, you cannot serve Hashem. You're not close to Hashem. The truth is, that sadness, right, is the biggest tumah, that there is. There's two big tumot, that are not really from halakha, more like, from the midot, from the character traits. Two big tumot. You know what it is? One is sadness, right? To be sad, and the other one is to overeat, to eat too much. A person eats too much, even though there's no halakha, doesn't say in the halakha, to eat one hamburger or 5. You can do whatever you want, You know what I mean? But the thing is, if you eat 5, you're gonna you're overeating, achilat gasa. So it's gonna bring you down, spiritually. You cannot go like high spiritually, The more you eat, the less spiritual you have. That's always the way it is. That's what I say to Chazal. Tell you like this, piece of advice. They tell you, if you are asking, why aren't I, acquiring the Torah, right? So they tell you, before you ask that question, right? Ask another question. Why am I eating, such good foods, such delicious foods? Because you're eating too much, and that's why you're not acquiring the Torah. That's the thing. So it goes one against the other. You cannot have both. Same thing with simcha. It's a prerequisite to growing in the Torah. The Arizal said, right? The famous statement of the Arizal. They asked him, he only lived 39 years. He didn't even get to the age of 40. You know what I mean? Can you imagine such a thing like this? And he acquired more Kabbalah, more Chokhmah and Kabbalah than anybody else in the last 500 years. Nobody was on his level. You know what I mean? So they asked him, how did you manage, to get to this level like this, to such a level like that? You're such a young man. So what he answered, right? He says, because I did everything with simcha. That's what he said. I serve Hashem with simcha. And that's why I got to the level that I got to. So you see from there, right? That the simcha is very crucial, to acquire the Torah. That's what it is, huh? Okay. You get the idea. Okay, next one, right? Tahorah. Right? What does that mean? Cleanliness, right? To be tahor, to be pure. Right? So there's different levels, of this, tahorah. One of the things, by the way, that a person has to be careful. To be tahor, you know what it is? If you have to go, excuse my language, right? Excuse my candor. If you have to go to the bathroom, go. Don't wait. Don't hold it in. You know what I mean? When you hold in, the stuff in your stomach or in your bladder, you have no tahara. You're impure. That's what it is, So that's why they always tell you, the Chazal, when you need to go to the bathroom, go right away. Don't wait. What are you waiting for? Yeah, let me wait. I can wait another half hour, I can hold it. Yeah, you can hold it, but that's not tahor. You're not pure like that. You're not supposed to do that, right? There's halachot about this, by the way, that a person is not allowed to pray, Amidah, when he needs to go to the bathroom. First he has to go. Even though he's going to miss the minyan, He's going to miss the minyan. Okay, so what? Better to miss the minyan than to pray with a full bladder. No, this is no good. So that's it's more important than minyan. So you have to have a clean body, you have to be tahor. Another thing is, that some people sometimes don't realize. By the way, Baruch Hashem, in America, it's better over here. But you realize, right, always, the people who come from the old country, right, the new guys, who came, right, off the boat, as they say, right, they just came off the boat. They always smell, you get into the elevator with them, they smell, because they don't bathe every day, they bathe once a week, They smell bad, you can't even stand next to them, If they stay in America for a few years, they learn, how to be a little bit more clean, because this is a different culture over here, When they come from the old country, can't stand next to them, it's terrible, what can you do, right? So that's the thing, another thing is also to keep your body clean. If you're not clean, right, as they, there's a saying like this, in America, cleanliness is next to godliness, when you're clean, you're next to God, but when you're not clean, you're tameh, you're impure, you're not pure. That's the thing, So that's also an important thing. So these things, a person needs to know how to do proper hygiene, to brush his teeth, keep his body clean, keep his stomach, clean, vacant. All these things, this is tahara, this is purity, The person has to know how to live his life in a pure way. There's also other things, Some people have bad habits, they smoke, all kinds of things, it kills the health. They do drugs, all kinds of things, all kind of bad things, This takes away your tahara. Okay, so you get the idea, right? Tahara. But tahara is also, a different level as well. More like a spiritual tahara. What I just told you is more like a physical tahara, But there's also the spiritual. So what is the spiritual? What does that mean? Don't live like an animal, your life. You know what I mean? Don't be a beast. Chaya, don't be chaya. So what does that mean? Everything you do, act like a human being. Don't be too animalistic. You know what I mean? Especially when it comes to things, like relations with your wife. Sex. Don't do sex like an animal. Behave like a human being. Don't go too crazy with sex. You know what I mean? You have to control yourself. I remember one time, I was when I was a young kid, I was dating, looking for a wife, So I went to Crown Heights over here, and they set me up with a girl over there. She wasn't from Chabad. She just Ashkenazi girl, not from Chabad, regular Ashkenazi girl, but she lived in Crown Heights. So I went out with her, took her to a restaurant, whatever. We sat down. Nice girl, But one of the things that she told me was I was shocked. You know what she said, right? He says, I heard from people, she was a Baal Tshuva, just became Baal Tshuva. She wasn't so strong, not from such a great family. But anyway, right? She says, I heard that when it comes to the bedroom, we throw away the Shulchan Aruch. What do you thought? I told her, I said, no, that's not the way it is. I'm sorry. Also in the bedroom, there's Shulchan Aruch. There's laws about how to behave yourself. Don't be an animal in the bedroom, with your wife, Don't act like an animal. That's the thing, So the person has to know, right? Also spiritually, to conduct himself with tahara. Not to become too animalistic, This is not the way of the Torah. You cannot acquire the Torah like that, to act like an animal. That's an important thing, right, to understand. Okay, very good, you got the idea. Next one, right? This one is very crucial, right? You know what it says, right? Shimush chachamim. Right? What does this mean? That you have to be around, the rabbis, chachamim, to learn from them. You have to be by them. You can't just say, you know what? I'm gonna go online, order some books, some Zohar, some books, Talmud, Zohar, this, that, Bet Yosef, I'll order it to my house and I'll become a Talmid Chacham, by myself. It's not going to work like that. The books are not going to make you Talmid Chacham. You also need rabbis, Chachamim, somebody to learn from, example, somebody to teach you how to do things. In the old days, they used to call this shimush, Chachamim. What does it mean, shimush? What does this word mean, shimush? To serve them. Yeah, to serve the Chachamim, right? Why serve them? Why do you have to serve them? You have to learn from them, no? Learn with them. That's what it should say. Why serve? What, you became his meltzar, his waiter? What does that mean, serve? Why does it say that? So the answer is in the old days, right? That's the way they learn from the rabbis. What they would do is, they would go to the big chacham, and they would tell him, Rabbi, listen, I'll do your work, like your housework, let's say, right? The stuff that you're supposed to do, I'll do it for you. I'll be your shamash. I'll serve you. But at night, I want you to teach me Torah, So we'll make a deal, In the daytime, I do your housework. You know what I mean? I do your chores. I mow your lawn, I go out to the lawn, mow your lawn. All kinds of things like this, right? I'll go wash your car, But at night, you're going to teach me, right? Yeah. We're going to learn like 3-4 hours, you're going to teach me, right? So they make a deal like this with the rabbi, So they would serve him like this, This was the deal that they used to do in the old days. You know what I mean? They not only things like this, they did even like more mundane things, like putting on his shoes, When he had to put shoes on, they would put the shoes for him, the rabbi. Serve him, like a servant, like a real servant. That's what they used to do in the old days, And as they were serving the rabbi, they would also ask him questions, What about this, rabbi? What's halakha? What's halakha with this, And by way of serving him, they would also learn from him halachot, about things, There's a funny story, right? Famous story about this, right? In the Talmud, brought down 2-3 times. The funny stories, right? Make you laugh, right? There, as we said, right? There's also halachot in the bedroom, how to behave, right? So what they used to do, the Talmudim, they would, when they knew their rabbi was going to be with his wife that night, They would go under the bed, and hide, and listen to what they're doing, So to learn halachot of how to be in the bedroom. This is what they did, So they would go under the bed, and listen, what is he doing now? Oh, he's doing this. Okay, he's doing like this, They used to. That's how they learned, like practical lessons, like how to behave, That's what they did. So, one time, right, it says in the Talmud, the rabbi, heard something under the bed, He heard this guy was there, the Talmud, So he thought maybe it's a mouse, or something, under the, whatever, right? No, then he realizes, it's not a mouse, it's somebody, it's a human being. So he tells him, he knows who it is, right? He says, "Hey, what are you doing over there?" He says, why are you under my bed? What are you doing under my bed when I'm with my wife?" So he says, "I'm sorry." He tells him, he says, "Rabbi, I had to learn the lesson, how to be with my wife, That's how I learned." That's what it says, right? So you see from there, right, that they used to serve the rabbis like this, really, be'emet. They used to do everything for them in order to learn from them, an example. As we spoke about, right, a few days ago, we said, right, that in the beginning, there was no machloket, in the halakha. Everything was halakha psuka. There was one halakha for everybody. That's the way it was, in the old days. But then what happened was, that it says they didn't serve the rabbis, properly, and because of that, they lost the masoret, the tradition. So this is what we're talking about, They weren't doing the shimush anymore, like they used to, to serve them like this. To put on their shoes, to dress them, to drive them like a driver, like a chauffeur, They didn't do these things, and that's why they lost the masoret. That's why we had machloket in the halakha, because they weren't serving the chachamim properly. But I have to tell you one thing, right? Nowadays, we don't do this anymore, We don't serve the rabbi like this anymore. Nobody does this anymore. Somebody does this? Yeah, he had shamash. Yeah. The truth is, I think he used to pay him, or whatever, or whatever it was, Yes, they had shamash. You're right, but this was more like a worker, not a talmid. You know what I mean? Not a talmid. It's a worker, somebody who's working for you. But today, we don't do this shamash business so much. Question is why? What changed? Manishtana. Right? So you know what the answer is? The answer is, they say, Chachamim, today we have books, that teach us the halachot. We have Sfarim. In the old days, the Torah Shabbat Peh, the oral Torah, they learned everything orally. They didn't have books in those days. In times of the Talmud, they had no books. Everything was oral. They came to the rabbi, everything came from his mouth. But then, they started to write the books, right? The more books they wrote, the less you need the rabbi. Why? Because you have it in the book, everything there. You know what I mean? So the more books we have, the less we need to be with the rabbi. We still need a rabbi, You still need. But not as much as before, Before it was like, you have to be with him like day and night, constantly. Now, you don't have to be like that. You don't have to be with your rabbi all the time. You got the books, The book is your rabbi. If you know how to read it, right, you have to know how to read. That's the thing, right? You have to know how to learn properly. They have to be trained for that, right? That's why people go to yeshiva, right? The young boys, they go to yeshiva. What's the purpose? The purpose is to learn how to learn the books, to understand them. That's one of the purposes of going to yeshiva. So that's the thing, so today we have more books, less shimush. But we still need a rabbi, Today, the rabbi is more like an example, like you see him, what he does, and you copy him. Monkey see, monkey do, Whatever you see that he does, you do also. He's an example for you, the rabbi today. And that's very important, You have to, because people learn today, not from what you tell them, they learn from what you do. They watch you, and they see. Oh, he does like this, I'll do it too, huh? That's the same thing with parents, Today, your children, they don't learn what you tell them, they learn what you do. They watch you, That's what they learn. They don't care what you tell them. They're not interested, in your musar, preaching, preaching to them. Okay, Abba, stop preaching to me, enough already. He doesn't care what you tell him. He cares what you do, He wants to see you do it. He wants it to be like that too. It's an example, That's what it is today. So that's what we're talking about. Okay, shimush, right? Very important. We'll do one more, I guess we'll stop there. So next one, right? Dibuk chaverim, also very important, right? It's related to what we just said. A person needs two things, basically, right? And also a third thing, a third thing as well. But this is number one. We just said now, right? To be with a rabbi, you need to be with a rabbi to get a masor, to get a tradition. You also need dibuk chaverim. What does this mean? You need a chavuta, not somebody who's, necessarily your rabbi. It's somebody who learns with you, studies with you together, a study partner. Because the truth is, you cannot really learn the Torah by yourself, just sitting by yourself, looking at the book. You cannot go deep into the Torah like this. You need a partner, to go back and forth, to argue a little bit, machloket, you fight a little bit, you fight a little bit with him, you argue, then this, right, kiss and make up, it's all good, right, everything is good. This gives you the understanding, the depths of understanding in the Torah, to have a chavruta. If you don't have chavruta, you cannot be like that, As we said, right, today also, the books, that we have today are like chavruta also, because they teach you a lot of things, Today we have the books. So it's somewhat like a chavruta, but still you need chavruta as well, to speak with somebody, to go back and forth, a good friend. That's why it says in Pirkeh Avot, right? It says, if you need a chavruta, right? Or if you need a Rabbi, you should even spend money for that, pay him, to learn with you. Let's say he doesn't want, he doesn't want to learn with you, right? He says, I'm busy, I'm sorry, I got a job. So tell him, okay, quit the job, I'll pay you, come and learn with me. If a person has enough money, to do this, he should do it, If he can't find the chavruta for free, you should pay him, to come and learn with him. That's what we have today in the kollel, right? In the kollel, what is it? What is a kollel? We pay them, to learn with each other, That's what it is. We give them a salary. That's what it's all about, So this is a very important thing, which is that you need to have a chavruta, because otherwise you cannot get into the depths of the Torah just by yourself, looking at the book, staring, like staring at the roof, like at the ceiling, you cannot. It doesn't go in like that. You need a chavruta, B'ezrat Hashem, next time we'll talk about also you need talmidim, you need also students. Once you become already a chacham, accomplished scholar, then you also need talmidim as well, to get even bigger, But so far we covered this, right? You need a Rabbi, and you need in chavruta, right? These two things you need for sure, right? As the chachamim said, right? Or chavruta or mituta. You know what that means? Or chavruta or death. Better to die if you don't have a chavruta. That's how bad it is. Can you imagine? So today, as we said, right? We have books. So it's also like a chavruta. But still, you need. ברוך ה' לעולם, אמן ואמן. רבי חנינא בן עקשיא אומר, רצה הקדוש ברוך הוא לעזור ישראל, לפיכך הכיר בו להם תורה ומצוות שנאמר אדוני חפץ, למען צדקו יגדיר תורה ויאדיר.